There's a shadow that hides a lot of secrets under the skin of a sheep. Suzy, Peppa's best friend, is a pretty controversial character, and there are mysteries about her that might be weirder than you think. But are the secrets really that evil? Let's make one thing clear. She doesn't have a dad, and we'll tell you why in a bit. But there is a male character who's responsible for this sheep's existence since the very first episode with Suzy. She showed up next to her mom and then with her grandma. Fans have a pretty valid question about Peppa's best friend's family. Who's Suzy's dad? There are a bunch of theories, but the most likely one is that Mrs. Sheep split from her ex-husband and got custody of her daughter. And yeah, that's totally possible. But the thing is, that wouldn't stop Mr. Sheep from being in his daughter's life unless he didn't want to. The second theory is that Suzy's mom is a widow because her husband sadly passed away. She's more alive, and it actually makes a lot of sense because the sheep wouldn't have taken Suzy to another country if her dad was still alive. The show even skips showing Suzy in the Father's Day episode on purpose to avoid answering that question. But we'll tell you the truth, Suzy might be a lab experiment led by a really smart scientist that we all know. He would obviously be the male character responsible for that. Hey there, guess what? Today we're diving into some mysteries with Suez. Grab your popcorn and kick back because another episode is starting. We're going to show you how to make a clone just like Suzy the sheep. So grab some paper and a pen or just use your phone. First off, take a picture of the person or animal you want to clone. Once you've got that image on your computer, right-click on the photo and select copy. And there you go, your clone is ready perfect. Is that how Suzy the sheep was created? Putting the jokes aside, she has all the chances of being a clone. Not of her mom, but of her grandma. And worse, there might be a whole family of clone sheep. Doubt it? Peppa Pig makes some references to the real world, like Queen Elizabeth I, Mr. Fox being a thief, and Mr. Wolf wanting to eat Daddy Pig, just like in the fairy tale. Those are some real-life examples. In Suzy's case, the character references the story of Dolly the sheep, who was the first cloned animal. The first animal clone made by humans is totally possible. Just like Blue references Australian culture, the show does the same with Great Britain. Dolly was a sheep from Scotland, and Peppa's best friend is a nod to that. Because of this, a much cooler theory can be made. There's another sheep that's important to the world and is also in Peppa's universe. I'm talking about Polly, a sheep created alongside Dolly, but the difference is that it's not a clone. It's an animal with human DNA, meaning it had human traits. You get where we're going with this? It's the same technology that created the world of Peppa Pig. Animals mixed with people. But who could have done that? There are only two characters capable of it, Grandpa Rabbit and of course Edmund Elephant, who is probably just an adult in disguise. Another clue is that there are only female sheep in this family, Grandma, Mummy Sheep, Suzy, and Cousin Charlotte. That's super weird. It's almost like they didn't have figures because they don't need them since they all are born in a lab. There's a lot of mystery, like a possible evil twin of SUS when she mistreats Peppa or wishes for trees to be cut down. These are two examples of the theory that she could be a clone and that there are other copies out there. The twin might not like having to pretend to be her sister, especially since her mom and grandma don't want to admit the truth to the whole town. That would be way too terrible for everyone, and could also reveal that the rabbits are behind all this. Cloning might be one reason why Mrs. Rabbit is always everywhere, even in France. In the case of the gang, her twin sister, who's actually a clone, is easily recognized when we see the little sheep being mean, like when she fights with Peppa or tells them to cut down trees for no reason. Maybe that's why Mrs. Sheep wanted so badly to leave the country. She just couldn't handle it. Keeping the daughter's clone hidden for so long and how she missed out on the job opportunity. The only solution was to invite Grandma to live with them so she could keep the clone locked up. Notice that when Suzy asks why they're moving, the character plays it cool and says there will be 3 people living in the house. She does this in front of Peppa just to throw the main character off, because there's already a clone living there. Would you want a clone to handle your boring tasks? Comment clone so we can make a copy of you. The reason behind everything is that the sheep family uses clones because they actually sell their own wool and need a lot of it. Just think about it. What a genius idea. The whole world needs sheep wool, and we see in the episode about George's new outfit that there are clothes made from wool that could only have come from Suzy and her family. That's how they make money, and that's why Mama Pig wanted to move to find a place that would buy sheep wool for a good price. As you probably noticed, the competition among sellers is tough since Suzy and her mom didn't land that dream job. And who's the owner of the sheepland trade? Of course, it's Mrs. Coelho and her whole family. They own all the businesses in town, not to mention Mr. Raposo's shop. Grandpa Coelho might have cloned Grandma Coelho years ago to start his wool clothing business, and that helped him build a huge fortune. But to keep the production going, he turns out, that's when Mama Rabbit and Cousin Charlotte were born. We say born so you get it, but really, the characters are lab creations. You might doubt what we're saying, but there's only one character in the Peppa universe wearing a wool outfit, and that's Grandpa Rabbit with his cozy hat on. Not to mention that beard that looks like it's made of wool. If you notice, there's an anchor design on Grandpa Rabbit's hat, symbolizing that he was a sailor. But the thing is, the characters in the Navy wear a different kind of hat. Where did Grandpa Rabbit get that simple object? He's caught up in this story about exploring sheep to sell wool. And that's why Suzy's mom gets sad when she finds out she doesn't have a job. She couldn't escape. Could Grandpa Rabbit's beard be a wool mask to keep his face warm? Want another hint that he was the one who made the clones? Take a good look at Suzy's sheep pajamas. In a future episode when Peppa goes to sleep at her house, the biggest clue is right there in the middle of the little sheep's pajamas. And we can see a drawing of an anchor just like the one on Grandpa Rabbit's wool hat. Everyone remembers the episode with Leo, Suzy's imaginary friend. But what if he's not exactly imaginary? What if Suzy actually sees a lion that only she can notice in the world? That would make her a bit of a strange sheep, right? Maybe. All the lab experiments she must have had last time, the little sheep started seeing things and developed a split personality. This theory could explain the whole evil twin sister thing. It's always been Suzy, or rather the other Suzy that exists inside the original one, who sees imaginary lions, or maybe something deeper. Suzy might be able to see spirits. Maybe that's why she didn't notice that Madame Gazelle didn't have a reflection in the mirror. She's so used to seeing stuff like that she didn't even realize her teacher could be one. There's a vampire in the little sheep's head. Some folks don't have reflections because she doesn't realize she can see things from the other side. You know what's better than seeing spirits? Watching our videos. So hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. But why is Suzy so eager to have the trees cut down? This mystery unfolds over a few episodes. First, when the turtle escapes from the vet and climbs the tree, all the characters mess up and get stuck in the branches. That's when Suzy gets an idea. It offers 3 chances for the plant to be knocked down. Is it against the environment or something like that? Is it evil and wants people to fall from the tree and get hurt? The truth is much simpler than that. Sheep really like to eat leaves, but since they're shorter and can't climb as well as their cousins, the goats, they can only eat the leaves that fall to the ground. Just like Peppa loves jumping in the mud because she's a pig, wolves like to howl because that's just what wolves do. And Pedro enjoys playing cowboy because he's a pony in the real world. Sheep love to chew on things, and what Suzy really wants is to reach the leaves up high in the trees. That way, she can bite something she can't normally get to. It's probably for the best that Grandpa and Grandma Pig never invite that sheep to their garden in the backyard. It could be pretty disastrous for the carrots and potatoes. Suzy just wants to be one. The nurses so much that in a future episode we see her fantasy, but there's also a drawing on the wall showing how much she wants this profession. But why exactly a nurse? Is there a reason she desires to take care of people so much? And Peppa's friend seems to like the idea of flying a plane when she grows up. Out of all the theories, this one makes the most sense. Suzy grew up away from her dad, and that's why she'd love to fly a plane, as it would help her live closer to him. But there's still more to it. It's a much deeper thing. She wants to be a nurse because maybe her dad is really sick or has already passed away while living far from her. In the episode about professions, she says she'd like to be a nurse because that job helps people get better. Anyone who's Peppa Pig knows it's a simple and fun show, right? But have you noticed that there are some animation mistakes throughout the episodes? One of them happens in the electricity episode. Right at the beginning, we see Peppa and George happily dancing, and when the family makes a cardboard TV, they're all having a blast. Then, the power comes back all of a sudden. But that's not the only thing that's sudden. If you look at the family's sound system, you'll see it's now facing the opposite direction from where it was before. First off, what probably caused this to happen was just a little editing mistake, not a ghost living in Peppa's house. Anyway, grab some popcorn because it's time for another episode of Team Vagos. Now, let's talk about something really creepy that happened in the ballet episode. We know Danny, and he's a dog that loves to have fun and play. You want to play ball, right? But when we see Madame Gazelle teaching some dance moves, he does something that we could almost call miraculous. You can see him leave one side of the scene and suddenly show up on the other. Kids are pretty quick and run around a lot, but for Danny to do that, he would definitely need to run almost at the speed of light, sneaking out the back of the school, making a loop, and coming in through the front door. That sounds exhausting. Mr. Potato Head is definitely one of the most intriguing characters. After all, he's a talking vegetable, which is pretty weird on its own. In some episodes, we get to know the Super A Potato goes to Peppa's school to rescue Mr. Potato, who's stuck in his car. He uses super strength to lift the car's roof off, but before he can, Mr. Potato pops out through the top with his head, which totally defies the laws of physics. In Chloe's puppet show, a few things really stand out. When Peppa and her family arrive at Daddy Pig's brother's house, you can see the doorknob is on one side of the door when the family open up, but when we see the kids inside, it's like the entrance flipped to the other side since the doorknob switched sides from what we saw before. Plus, the door mysteriously looks closed, and when they walk in, Chloe's family is there, so it should have been open. That's a logical mistake. And if you're a fan of Peppa and her family, drop a comment below with P so we know who's part of our Pink Pig fan club, famous in the cartoon world from the swimming episode. Right at the start, we see a changing room with 4 doors, each a different color. Daddy Pig comes out of the first blue door, Mommy Pig from the green door, Peppa from the yellow door, and George from the red door, and they stay that way throughout the whole episode. But when we get to the end, something amazing happens. The colors completely change, and the order is flipped. Is this the upside down world of Stranger Things? Let's move on. It's Dad Pig's birthday episode, and Dad wishes he didn't have to go to work on his special day. The whole family is getting together to make a birthday cake for him. We see a bunch of ingredients on the table, like milk, eggs, and flour. There's also a wooden spoon next to some chocolate chunks that they'll use shortly. Then Mommy Pig starts putting all the ingredients into a big bowl, and as the scene zooms out, looks like the spoon magically went right over to Mom. Seems like besides baking awesome cakes, she knows some pretty cool magic tricks. And it looks like George inherited that magic skill from Pig Mom too. Right after that, the main character asks to mix the cake batter, and her little brother is right there with her. Now take a look at George's hand. There's nothing in it, but in a split second, a second spoon pops up. Where did that come from? Going back to the puppet show at Cousin Chloe's house, we can notice a few more things that are off. When she shows the box with the puppet models to be painted, we see that there are 1, 2, 3, 4 puppets in there. Chloe pulls one out and we see only 3 left in the box. But then, in the next scene, after painting 2 eyes on the puppet she was holding, suddenly there are 4 puppets back in the box plus 1 in Chloe's hand, making a total of 5. That's the magic of it. The weirdest part is that when Chloe takes out the puppet she's going to use for the dinosaur marionette, we see that George's number of puppets changes again, going back to 3 like it should be. So Chloe grabs it to paint, and only 2 are left in the box, and they're right next to each other. That's when we notice another mistake. When the angle of the scene changes, we can still see 2 puppets in the box, but they're positioned differently than before. Now each of them is at one end of the container, which doesn't make any sense. But you know what makes a lot of sense? Subscribing to our channel. If you're a fan of cartoons like we are, this is definitely the place for you. Now let's get into the episode where George gets a new dinosaur. We see that Peppa's world is a bit different since, besides talking animals and plants, celestial bodies tend to disappear quite often. At night we see the stars and the moon in their bedroom window. But when the scene shifts to just Dad and Mom, we notice the moon has gone for a stroll since it disappears. In the episode with George's friends, we spot another animation mistake involving objects appearing and disappearing. This time it's the sand buckets that George and his friend were playing with, and they're right next to the kids. So Peppa and Suzy start a little argument defending each other. Your brother is just messing around, and notice that when the image zooms back out, the 2 buckets of sand seem to have disappeared like they were never there. Did the boys toss them in the air while none of us were looking? Besides that hide and seek game in the Chloe's Puppets episode, there's something else kind of weird happening in the room. Notice that on the girl's bed, there's a stuffed animal that looks like a panda, and we also see a ball. But when we go to the part where the kids are having a blast painting their dolls and puppets, we see that both items just vanish like magic. When the 2 families gather for lunch, notice that the table is full of plates of spaghetti and wine. Glasses for the 4 adults, plus 3 cups of soda for the kids. And check it out, the kids' cups are half full. The wives say that Daddy Pig and his brother look a lot alike, but they insist they don't look anything alike. When the image zooms in, we can see that the cups of the 3 kids are completely empty. So they definitely drank everything while we were watching the 2 messy brothers. Or maybe someone thought it would be too much trouble to put fizzy drinks back in the containers. Going back to the episode of Daddy Pig's birthday, we notice once again that something doesn't quite add up. After moving George a bit, Mommy Pig asks Peppa to lower the tray so that she puts the inside, but notice that she pours everything from the bowl. So if that happened, why does Mommy Pig put the cake in the oven while Peppa is holding the bowl as if it's not completely empty? How did a spoon end up back in there? This Mommy Pig's kitchen is really confusing me. Even with a few little mistakes, Peppa Pig is one of the most well-known shows in the world, and those small inconsistencies are just part of it. It's normal. We're just letting it go. Awesome. Content for you to keep having fun with us. Thanks, and see you next time.